There are some whores in this house.
I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Wet ass P-word.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, everybody, welcome to the show. It's a Friday show, actually on the cusp of holiday weekend. So, of course, we have an announcement about that, about our schedule. When it comes to next week, a lot of exciting stuff, including a day off, but also the interview with Cenk Uygur, which will be fantastic. So we're going to be doing that on Wednesday, but it will not be live, unfortunately, but we'll have sections of it. We're going to post it up on YouTube, so you guys will be able to see it. Patrons, of course, will get it in the entirety. I will figure out some way to do it. Anyway, I get ahead of myself, but we got a great show today. So, look, we're going to talk about, of course, Donald Trump's comments against the troops. Alleged comments, I should say. Turns out there's a little bit of skepticism among some members of the left about it. So that is somewhat interesting. Then, of course, we've got the reaction from at least one former member of the military. Then I've got some poll numbers for that. We've got Fox News that's obsessed with Nancy Pelosi and her hair. That's insane. But actually, you know what? Out of all the Fox News segments, the one that I'm going to show you is actually one of the best. Interesting. There's going to be good points on all sides. Fascinating. And then we are going to talk about, of course, about how, well, okay, let me rephrase that. We're going to answer the question if you're better off than you were 4 years ago under Trump. So we're going to talk about that. That's a good story. A lot of detail. Look, I'm deep diving in today. So, you know, like it's going to be, we're going into the pool. Okay.
Wet ass P-word.
That's right. That's what's going to happen. Sorry. I'm terrible. I know. I should not be playing around with that soundboard as much as I do, but I enjoy it. So whenever I get new sounds on it, I just got to play them. But anyway, too much fun. But like I said, deep dives, especially into the alleged comments by Trump about the military. So we're going to do that. So stay right here. Again, before we go into it, please like and share the stream. Helps us get more eyeballs and just helps us out generally. More eyeballs, more subs, all that stuff. So that's what we want here. All right, everybody. Let's do it. All right. President Trump allegedly made some denigrating comments towards our service members back in 2018, at least according to some anonymous sources speaking to The Atlantic. So there's a lot of controversy about this, whether or not he actually did say these things. But before I get into that, let's kind of dive into what he allegedly said. So now, again, The Atlantic, let's see. In The Atlantic, it was written that President Trump had referred to dead American soldiers as losers and suckers after canceling a trip to a World War I cemetery. So now Trump allegedly rejected the idea of a visit to the American cemetery near Paris in 2018 because he feared that his hair would become disheveled by the rain, and because he did not believe that it was important to honor American war dead, according to 4 people with knowledge of the discussion that day. And again, all of these people are anonymous, so take that into consideration, whether or not you trust that. Again, you could say, oh, it's Trump derangement syndrome. He didn't actually say that. Look, the White House is already pushing back on this very heavily. But nonetheless, as I'm going to explain, this kind of tracks, at least in my opinion, for what I've seen from the president. So let's dive into it. Now, it was written that in a conversation with senior staff members on the morning of the scheduled visit, Trump said, quote, allegedly, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." In a separate conversation in the same trip, Trump allegedly referred to the more than 1,800 Marines who lost their lives at Belleau Wood as, quote, suckers for getting killed. So losers and suckers. Okay. So if this is to be correct, then fighting to die in a war for America, for the country, I guess makes you a sucker in the eyes of Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, and this kind of go, into why I believe that this tracks, and that it is something that he either might have said or at least maybe thinks. And again, a lot of this is guesswork, but from, what we've read and what we've seen, what we've heard of Donald Trump, wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility. Look, this is somebody who had many deferments from Vietnam, including one for alleged bone spurs. And so it seems like somebody who's trying desperately to stay out of, to not put his body on the line, so to speak, right, in war, and trying everything, in order to get out of it, not because he was a conscientious objector, but, unlike Muhammad Ali, who actually went to prison for his beliefs, Donald Trump got many deferments. I'm pretty sure his father intervened on his behalf to prevent his idiot son from being killed in the war. Because, Donald Trump, that's like the first guy to get mowed down, honestly. But okay, so there's that, right? So again, I think that it probably is true that he would think that somebody like that would think soldiers were suckers. Because again, this is a person that we've shown over and over again to be out for themselves. So now let me give you some history on this. Okay. Now, Belleau Wood was a consequential battle in American history, and on the ground which it was fought is venerated by the Marine Corps. America and its allies had stopped the German advance towards Paris in the spring of 1918. That, of course, is one of the major ways that they stopped Germany from winning that war. Now, also interesting that it kind of, Germany's lost, obviously set the stage for World War II because you had the Treaty of Versailles that was incredibly harsh. It was so harsh it wrecked the German economy and allowed for the rise of the fascist Nazi party to take over. I find that very interesting. I like to study the history. I like to look at the history of this stuff, especially when it came to the world wars. But Donald Trump's got a different take because he's shown in many respects that he doesn't care about the history of what happened. In fact, allegedly, Trump had asked, who were the good guys? In World War I, who were the good guys? That is a very curious question. I mean, look, America was on the side of the Allies, if that's what you're wondering. And look, as far as World War I is concerned, it was a complicated war. Let's just say that, right? Because you had all these old political alliances between all these different countries, and it was described in the years leading up to the war as essentially a powder keg, right? Where any one thing could set it off, and what set it off, of course, was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. And so, look, again, super complicated, right? That would be far beyond the comprehension of Donald Trump, who does not care. So he said he didn't understand, by the way, why America would intervene on the side of the Allied powers, right, in this war. And so, of course, that's allegedly not the only thing that Donald Trump didn't understand about this. According to their sources here, with knowledge of the president's views, he seemed to generally not understand why Americans would treat former prisoners of war with respect. So, prisoners of war, I mean, look, you guys know I'm not a fan of John McCain, right? The late John McCain. But you got to give him some credit. He got captured, right? And that already Donald Trump has openly said that makes you a loser. I prefer people that don't get captured in war. That's what he said. And again, that's what lends credence to these allegations, right? Because he had absolutely no respect for John McCain or anything. Now, I also have little respect for John McCain. But the one thing that I can point to, like, that's kind of ballsy, is that he had the option, since he was pretty high ranking and had connections, to walk away from the prison camp that he was being held in. He's like, nah, either you let me and my boys go, or I'm just going to stay. And so they said, well, we're not going to let anybody else go. We're just going to let you go. He said, no, I'll stay. Because unless you're letting my soldiers go, I'm not going to go. So that, look, as much as I didn't like John McCain while he was alive, that's like a little bit of respect there, because at least you seem to have cared about the people that were under your command, that you were your fellow soldiers, right? And so, yeah, I have some respect for that. And you can disagree with that, and that's fine, right? I just personally think that that's kind of badass. But anyway, he also apparently doesn't understand why pilots who were shot down in combat are also honored by the military. And on at least 2 occasions since becoming president, according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of his views, Trump referred to former President George H.W. Bush as, quote, a loser for being shot down by the Japanese as a Navy pilot in World War II. Bush had escaped capture in that point, but 8 other men shot down during the same mission were caught, tortured, and executed by Japanese soldiers, which George H.W. Bush could have ended up being one of those people. So there's more. Now, on Memorial Day 2017, Trump allegedly, while visiting Arlington National Cemetery with John Kelly, according to sources with knowledge of the visit, Trump turned, and this is why, this is all while standing by Robert Kelly's grave, right? Turned directly to him, to John Kelly, and said, I don't get it. What was in it for them? What was in it for them? And so, understand, everything that I know about Donald Trump is that he is deeply transactional, right? Is that he doesn't see the value in anything that does not benefit a person directly. So, if I'm not getting anything out of it, and that's, of course, a polite way of saying that he's an incredibly selfish person. Okay? An incredibly selfish person. Say, well, what's in it for them? I mean, what a bunch of dopes. What a bunch of dopes and losers. God, suckers. I mean, why would you get yourself killed for your country? It doesn't make any sense to me. That's what he's allegedly saying. That's allegedly what he's saying. Okay? And this entire thing, by the way, is written by Jeffrey Goldberg, which, again, there's been some critics on the left that have said, look, I'm dubious about about the veracity of these claims, of these quotes, since they are not sourced, right? They are anonymous quotes from military officials. I would prefer alleged military officials. I would prefer that these sources make at least one or two of them come out to corroborate. But again, even without that, I'm more tending, I tend to believe them over anything else because of the fact that we have already seen Trump's behavior towards military families, Gold Star families, towards, again, the cons, people like John McCain, even, who I have massive, massive problems and disagreements with. But nonetheless, loser, sad baby, to these military families. And so I don't think he gives a damn about people in the military. And so that kind of does lend a little bit of credence to at least this kind of attitude, whether or not he actually literally said it. I think it's obvious that he has disdain to certain people, obviously who go against him, right? Who disagree with him that happen to be in the military, as well as, of course, people who, tend to do things that don't benefit themselves. As the kind of person that Donald Trump is, he doesn't see the value in serving a greater power. That's why I really doubt that he's a religious person. And I doubt, and I very much, again, put stock into this, at least having this kind of mindset towards military members and veterans and things like that. So again, that's where I come from, and I could be wrong. And there are legitimate questions about the veracity of this stuff, but I'm going to err on the side of, I think that this is probably true, whether or not we could prove it or not. So that said, Goldberg writes, quote, he can't fathom the idea of doing something for someone other than himself, one of Kelly's friends told Atlantic columnist Jeffrey Goldberg. He just thinks that everyone who does anything when there's no direct personal gain to be had is a sucker. There's no money in serving the nation, Kelly's friend went on to allegedly say. Trump can't imagine anyone else's pain. That's why he would say to the father of a fallen Marine on Memorial Day in the cemetery where he was buried. That's why he would say that. So, look, that's really the trait of a sociopath. Like, that's it makes Trump sound like a sociopath, right? Which, again, wouldn't it all surprise me if it were true? But here's another thing. I'm going to go off on just a little bit of a tangent here for just a second. This is kind of why I'm against American imperialism. Okay. So look, I think that our government right now uses military men and women to serve the corporate military industrial complex, while grossly, of course, underpaying, undercompensating, and not taking care of our people that are out fighting or that come back as veterans. There are huge issues with the way that we treat veterans in this country, especially Republicans, right? So Republicans tend to use veterans as props and then don't go out of their way to make sure that they have adequate health care, housing, funding, mental health care, for PTSD, all that stuff. So, and Republicans are really bad at it, and Democrats aren't great either, but are far better, of course, than Republicans on the issue of veterans. It seems like both parties really tend to just want to shovel more money towards defense contractors. And so that's a bit of a problem. And again, that's part of the American imperialism. But understand that also, I think for a lot of people that sign up to serve, they are getting exploited by the military industrial complex. I mean, it's kind of sickening that you have video games, and video game companies that are pushing recruitment for the military to COD kids playing Call of Duty. Okay, so that's a problem for me, right? And I think a lot of that, again, to going with that exploitation here, so you got a lot of poor kids coming out of high school that see the military or convinced by the military that it's a way to get themselves out of poverty and get an education. And so that's a problem. Maybe we should, instead of pushing people into exploitation by the military industrial complex, fund free college for everybody and make sure everybody gets a living wage. That's just my perspective on this, right? And understand that it's not the same for every person. And I'm not saying the military is exploiting everybody. I mean, for example, there's people like Pat Tillman, who, by the way, I just said that they're not exploiting everybody. But that's kind of a poor example because the military actually also is exploiting Pat Tillman. But Tillman, understand, like this story is also pretty complicated when it comes to Tillman. But he gave up a multi-million-dollar sports contract and this career, right, to serve in the military. So now he was like, no, I'm going to serve something bigger. I'm going to serve my country. I love America. I love the opportunity that I've been given. So I'm going to go and I'm going to sign up to serve my country. Later on, he finds out, oh my God, that was a mistake. So there's a great article in The Intercept, right, that kind of pointed out why he started speaking out even while he was in the service. Quote, shortly after arriving in the country, Tillman confided in his brother and their friend Russ O'Bear that he thought that the invasion of occupation of Iraq were, quote, fucking illegal. Pat Tillman, hero. Pat Tillman died from friendly fire after speaking out against the occupation of Iraq. And at the same time, going back to the exploitation angle, right? The military uses Pat Tillman and his image as like, this is why you should sign up to go bomb brown people overseas. Look, he died in a country that didn't attack us. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were monumental mistakes, as was the war in Vietnam. A lot of these wars are illegal and terrible and part of this, Western imperialism, right? And so Tillman's story is absolutely devastating and is an example, by the way, of how conservatives tend to use and abandon the people who do literally go into the military with the best of intentions to try to serve this country. And so those are the people I do respect. But at the same time, it's like, no, don't do it. Don't do it, because you're not serving who you think you're going to serve. Like, you're going to end up serving the CEO of ExxonMobil more than you are the freedoms of fellow Americans. And so, but anyway, maybe in context, Trump might have a point. I never thought I'd say that. But obviously, look, when you look at how he arrives at those points, it's through selfishness and sociopathy and not like a general caring about the troops. And so understand that too. And so those those numerous generals, by the way, according to Goldberg, were asked by him over the past year for their analysis of Trump's, quote, seeming contempt for military service. So understand too that this is a piece that has a perspective that is very anti-Trump from Goldberg. So understand that perspective, it's not like trying to be neutral. It sounds a bit like an op-ed, to be honest with you, and it might just be. Okay. Nonetheless, again, I do think, and I'm going to keep repeating myself, that there is definite basis for these comments to be true. Now, some of his cynicism, they say, is that Trump, unlike previous presidents, tends to believe that the military, like other departments of the federal government, is beholden only to him and not the Constitution. Again, we can back that up by Donald Trump allegedly asking different heads of different departments if they were loyal to him. And of course, you look at the actions by William Barr when it comes to, as well, being a loyal person versus Jeff Sessions, who Trump had, basically decided was disloyal because he wouldn't recuse himself during the Mueller investigation. And so I think that tracks as well. Now, the other thing about that, of course, is that if you're expecting the military to be loyal to you and not to the Constitution, that seems rather authoritarian and fascistic. Okay. Now, another explanation they say is that the president believes that nothing is worth doing without the promise of monetary payback, and that talented people who don't pursue riches are quote unquote losers. Now, Goldberg also cites eyewitnesses that after a White House briefing given by then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford, that Trump had turned to aides and said, that guy is smart. Why did he join the military? Basically implying that if you join the military, you're stupid. Quote, one officer with firsthand knowledge of Trump's views also said that, quote, he also doesn't see the heroism in fighting. Now, for me, I do see that, right? Again, I'm anti-war. I'm a pacifist, but I can see that, like, hey, if our country's attacked, then of course you put everything on the line. And again, I have all respect towards the people who enlist, right? Who say, yeah, I want to protect the country. Again, I think that right now you're not doing so because really what you're doing is putting forward the and I should say it comes from the top, really, because of the military-industrial complex, putting forward the interests of oil companies and the military-industrial complex, the defense contractors first. But again, like, I have respect for people who would put their lives on the line because they believe in this country. They believe that they're serving America. And again, going back to Pat Tillman, huge respect for him, right? And so I think that is heroism. But at the same time, Donald Trump doesn't see it that way. He thinks that people who do that are dopes and losers. And so going by all of this, again, assuming that it's true, I think that, if monetary gain is your first and foremost goal, as it seems to be, well, then I'm afraid that if somebody paid him enough, I don't know if I could trust Donald Trump to not betray the country itself. And that seems a bit like maybe the logical conclusion that Goldberg wants us to get to. Maybe that was meant that way for us to arrive at that, or maybe not. But I got there, and it's like that realization of, do we have a president who would sell us out? I don't know. But it is scary to think about that we've had 4 years of this guy and could have a potential for more. Especially knowing what we know now. All right. Let's move on. That was a bit of a long segment here. Deanna Smith says, by the way, all post 9/11 vets fall into two camps: those that recognize the war crimes and mistakes, and fascists. I'm going to give you a breakdown of how the military members feel about Donald Trump, and you might be a little surprised. So, or not. Let's dive into it. All right. In the wake of the bombshell Atlantic story about how Donald Trump allegedly believed that, or told people that soldiers are suckers and losers, a retired general went on CNN to elaborate how members of the military might view the commander-in-chief following that. Take a look.
There's a variety of views, Jim, as you well know, but the ones I've been talking to, and there have literally been hundreds, have said that this is vile and disgusting. He doesn't understand service and sacrifice. There's a great movie called The Bridges at Toko-Ri where an individual, a famous line says, "Where do we get these men?" I would say the same thing. Where do we get these men and women who dedicate their lives to do the things that they need to do? And for the president to degrade them, to defile them in their service, as he is reported to have done, to me is just frankly disgusting. I don't understand it. These are people who put their life on the line. I've been honored over my decades of service to have stood next to these individuals and to see the kinds of faith they have in our country and what they do for our country, and to have someone reportedly say these kind of things and then try and cover it up and lie about it. And as Allison said a minute ago, that seems to be his modus operandi, is to continue to lie. We've seen what we've seen. He is who he is, but it's not the kind of individual we should have as a leader and as a commander-in-chief.
All right. So that was retired General Mark Hertling, by the way, speaking to Jim Sciutto. So, look, there's a lot of controversy around this Atlantic article, right? Now, some are saying that, since it's unsourced, since it's anonymous sources, you can't exactly 100% trust what is in this article. Totally understand that. Now, given what I know about the president, and some of the stuff that he said before about members of the military, Gold Star families, et cetera, and certain congressmen who were veterans. And, and knowing, again, as much as I do about Donald Trump, I would say that it's more likely to be true and correct. And so for me, look, I remember when Donald Trump's former ghostwriter came out and he said, look, Donald Trump's a transactional person. If you've got something that he wants, he's more than happy to help you out. If you don't have anything, then he's cold as ice. Cold as ice. And so I think the exact quote was, he pisses ice water. And so, look, it's not entirely out of the norm to think that somebody is, who is transactional like that would think that you're an idiot if you don't get something out of doing something for someone, right? And it makes me think like the guys like literally John Galt out of the Ayn Rand books. And that's literally the philosophy, right? Service and altruism were stupid, in her opinion. I think Trump's the same way. I mean, that's why you can point to his charity foundation, right? His supposable charitable foundation that really wasn't doing charity. They were using money, donor money, to buy pictures of himself. And so it's never been about charity, as far as I could tell. That's why it was shut down by the state of New York for defrauding people. That's why the Trump family is not allowed to operate a charity in that state ever again. And so, yeah, I totally believe it. So, look, another example, all right? What about the measly presidential salary that he gave up? Measly to him, maybe not to me. I'd love to have that money. But you think that compares to the billions of dollars that he saved in taxes because of his tax cuts, the corporate tax cuts? No, you're kidding me. Or the membership fees from Mar-a-Lago, now that people want to cozy up to the president and buy memberships. And by the way, he jacked up, what is it, 6 times the rates that he had before, or 60%. I mean, you're delusional if you don't understand how much he is really out for himself. But on to the bigger points, right? So is the general right? That members of the military have a negative view of Donald Trump? Well, in the latest results of a Military Times poll, which was conducted by the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse, they surveyed over 1,000 active duty troops in late July and early August. This is obviously before this came out. Nearly half of all respondents, 49.9%, had an unfavorable view of President Trump, compared to 38% who had a favorable view. So now understand, there's some really important context when it comes to these poll numbers, right? But among all survey participants, 42% said they strongly disapproved of President Trump's time in office. Now, look, losing the military as, a Republican is terrible. The military is not known to be liberal, right? I'm not saying there aren't liberals in the military. Of course there are. there are plenty of progressive veterans and, liberals in the military. In fact, there's about, what is it? As far as it holds up, I think there's somewhere around 16% of, military members, active military, that are, describe themselves as liberal or progressive. And so there's that. But generally, Democrats don't poll well when it comes to the military because generally they're dominated by Republicans. In fact, 40% of troops surveyed identified as Republican or Libertarian, 16% Democrats. And actually, this is even more surprising, 44% are independent or belong to other parties, although I do think that a lot of those independents do probably lean to the right from what I could see. If you're, again, a supporter of Donald Trump, very likely that you have conservative views. And so, again, that's why Democrats don't poll well, because they're a very small minority of the military. And so, look, you can even look at this, right? And compare it to Obama. Obama was not very popular with the military. Obama only had a 36% favorable rating and a 52% unfavorable rating in a January 2017 Military Times poll. So, I mean, you look at that and it's like, well, Obama is actually doing worse than Donald Trump, but understand that the military is not Obama's base. They're not a Democratic base. They're a Republican base. They're a Republican stronghold, and they are not breaking for Donald Trump. In fact, among active duty service members surveyed in this poll, 41%, this is a majority, said that they would vote for Joe Biden if the election were held today, compared to 37% who planned to vote for Trump. Another 13% went third party, and 9% said, I'm just going to skip it. Interesting. Very interesting. And by the way, it's not just an unfavorable view of Trump. Again, it's very unfavorable. Only 24% were very favorable. So there's that comparison. It's almost double for the unfavorables. I guess that's what happens when you disparage veterans. When not only that, but when you, of course, abandon Kurdish allies. That was something that a lot of military members were very unhappy about because they had developed friendships and relationships, working relationships with the Kurds when it came to Syria, but it was abandoned. They were abandoned. It's also what happens when you kick out transgender military troops. And also when you say stupid things like, avoiding STDs was my personal Vietnam. That was something that he wrote. Okay. And so, look, I'm just going to say that just like if you're a civilian, if you're an active duty military person, right? Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about you. I mean, he may be the commander in chief, but he does not care about the people under his command. And we can see that, right? I think that he's 100% totally out for himself, and he always has been. All right. I'm going to take a break here. We're going to come back. We've got Fox News. We actually have a pretty good discussion on Nancy Pelosi and her salon visit. So we'll talk about that. And then we've got disastrous economic numbers as well. And to answer the question, are you better off than you were 40 years ago? We'll do that right after this break around the nation.
I like my meat tight. Tighten up my meat.
Wet ass P word.
All right, I'm having too much fun with that. All right, welcome back to the show. Round the Nation right here, Waldorf Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so first, before we dive back into the show, I'm going to thank a couple of patrons. Stonewall Jackwagon, kind of an awesome name. And Suzette Figs, thank you for signing up to become a patrons. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Link is in the description. If you're curious about spelling. Members, Rogue Jedi and Bus 76 to Running Brook. So thank you for signing up to be a channel member as well. You want to join, hit that join button below. Also, thank you to those who have so far donated to the fundraising campaign. We actually received some of the stuff so far. We've got a case, we've got some RAM, and we got a board. We got a motherboard. So I'm actually going to build this myself, put it together, and so I might film that because it would be hilarious watching me fuck around with shit, and then hopefully not break anything. I mean, look, I've built computers before. That's maybe why they suck. No, I'm kidding. Of course. All right. Anyway, so let's dive in to the next segment here. Let's talk about Nancy Pelosi's hair. Yeah, I know. You guys, I warned you it was coming. It's the wrong one. Get me hair today. There we go. You may have noticed as of late that Fox News has gotten a little bit obsessed with Nancy Pelosi, specifically her visit to a hair salon in San Francisco. So now, of course, in the video where she is in the salon, she's not wearing a mask, which is stupid. It's dumb. If you want to criticize her for breaking the mask mandate, that's absolutely fine. That's totally fair, right? And to be fair, this is one of the Fox News segments where they're actually going to be, I mean, I'm going to kind of agree with it. Now, that said, right, it kind of diminishes real criticism when your network has been extremely partisan about masks, for example, downplaying the use of and need of masks, as well as the dangerousness of the virus as well. But nonetheless, I want to go, because this is actually a pretty good discussion that happened, which is pretty rare on Fox News, and it involves Sandra Smith. Now, Sandra Smith's actually been known for asking tough questions of Trump cabinet members, and so she's actually going to have a discussion with Democratic strategist Zach Friend. And look, they're both actually going to make some pretty good points. So let's start out with the first clip.
Well, I think that in a lot of respects, it's a he said, she said. It's kind of unfortunate, though. I mean, I don't think Nancy Pelosi's hair, Sandra, is the most pressing issue in America right now.
She said. Which part? We've got video of her not wearing a mask inside a salon.
Yes, no, I understand that. But the fact that the state regulations in San Francisco say that you can have indoor salons with conditions right now. So when she contacted the salon, she was told that it was one person at a time. That was backed up by the stylist, and so she followed that. With that said, though, do I think she's owed an apology? I don't think she's owed an apology. I think that realistically, it's just not the most important issue that's facing America right now with unemployment and a number of the other issues. I just don't think Nancy Pelosi's hair is really the topic du jour.
Look, I pretty much agree with all of that, right? So, look, he's right about the conditions. I think she should have wore a mask, and he agrees that she would have should have wore a mask. Just wear the mask. Don't be stupid. just wear the freaking mask. As for the he said, she said comment, that's where I disagree with Friend. The video does speak for itself. Overall, though, yeah, there are bigger things to talk about. But see, look, and the reason that I'm talking about this is because it actually is a decent example of a good conversation, as well as pointing out that Fox News seems to be having like a a chubby over this, over this video, because they continue to play it over and over again and to bring people on to have discussions about it. And so this guy brings that up. And so it's a bit of hypocrisy, but again, there's glass houses, right? And Fox News lives in a glass house, even when there's actual good, legitimate criticism of Nancy Pelosi, as I'm also pointing out, because why did she do this? It was so incredibly dumb. But anyway, so there's more video here. Let's go to the next one as they continue this discussion.
Don't you really wonder and worry about the political implications of this double standard? Mask up, wear your mask, and then she just very plainly walked through a salon with people around her when it very clearly stipulates, you apparently say you read the code as well, that you must wear a mask in a public place even when no one's present.
No, I agree with that, Sandra. I mean, I think unequivocally we have to keep masks on indoors. I think California's state guidelines are very clear on that. And I think San Francisco County and city guidelines are very clear on that. And I think that is something that should be acknowledged by the speaker, that a mask should have been worn indoors. What I'm saying is that the state has been modifying guidelines on a pretty regular basis. And last Friday, the governor had a press conference outlining new guidelines for salons, which included this ability for indoor operations with conditions across the state. There's no question there's a lot of confusion county by county. But I just don't think that the haircut really is the biggest issue facing America.
And I think that's the problem. She should know the rules.
All right, again, friend, has an explanation. He's like, look, yeah, you can do that according to these rules, and these rules are ever changing. And that's absolutely true, right? And then Sandra Smith is also like, yeah, but she's Speaker of the House. Maybe this is a bad look. And it's true. And look, anybody who's not being a partisan hack, and I understand that, like, we're in hyper-partisan times, right? So it's really easy to just be like picking one side. No, they owe her an apology. I don't think they do. No, they set me up. Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, maybe she was kind of mad. The owner of this, right? And maybe she was a little bit partisan, but nonetheless, we do live in a hyper-partisan country. And so that does play into a lot of this. But at the same time, I don't think criticizing her for her not wearing a mask and for her using, I think, her position and her wealth in order to do some things that regular Americans really are discouraged from doing right now is a terrible look. And so, yeah. And the thing is, how did Nancy Pelosi not believe that, okay, maybe she didn't. All right. To be fair, I don't think anybody expects their hair salon to go and release footage to Fox News. So let's be fair about that, right? But now that it's out there, to not go and say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I didn't wear a mask and that was bad. You should all wear your masks. She instead gets very indignant, right? And then, of course, that helps Republicans because Fox News can sit there and fillet themselves about this, over this footage. And as some people do point out, hey, it is difficult to cut hair when somebody's wearing a mask. I also understand that. And so that's another fair criticism as well. And so, I mean, it's a conversation which, again, takes very partisan turns. And it's one of those things where I think that, it just generally kind of be like the rest of us. Some of us have went without haircuts, present company excluded, because I don't go to a barber shop. I just shave my head. But there's a lot of us who don't get haircuts, who haven't had a haircut in months because of the coronavirus shutdowns. And so for Pelosi, it's like, come on, dude, really? Come on. That said, right, there are more important issues. And again, he brings this up. I mean, nearly 190,000 Americans are dead. 8.3 million people can't afford to pay their bills this month. 80,000 businesses have closed for good between March and July. Why is Fox News constantly talking about this? About Nancy Pelosi's hair appointment? You know why? It's because it's it's partisan red meat. That's what it's all about. So now, I've got one more video here. And again, I think this was part of Friend, like being, and I really do think that he's like not trying to be part. I think he actually is being like honest with his answers, and trying to have a conversation in good faith. And I also do believe that Sandra Smith is also trying to have a conversation in good faith. And so let's look at that last video, and you guys can determine that for yourself.
Zach, I appreciate your acknowledgement that you do believe, she should have been wearing a mask. But it's not that easy. I mean, there's livelihoods at stake. People are losing their businesses. Obviously, other people have been playing by the rules. They wish they could go into the salon too, I'm sure. But she's living by different rules, and she didn't own up to it. In fact, she pointed fingers at the salon owner and accused her of a setup.
Well, again, there's two things here, though. And I mean, did the press secretary, by the way, comment on the RNC having 1,500 unmasked people outside of the White House the other day, hugging, kissing, and shaking hands for the RNC convention? I mean, realistically, Sandra, we know that this issue is much broader than this one individual situation. But I agree with you. I just also think, though, that it just isn't the most important issue. I don't think that we should be focusing this much time on television talking about this when we should be talking about coronavirus and a number of the other issues impacting Americans.
I think people hear you, and I think that they see her defense of it rather than acknowledgement of something she did wrong, a mistake, something. They see excuses, and I don't know if the story goes away.
All right, so again, that last part, I can see the point there. Again, Sandra Smith, sort of reasonable for a Fox host, but it is kind of weird. So here's what I think about this entire thing, right? I think Nancy Pelosi, yeah, I'm not a fan of her. I think that, I think she probably did make a mistake, at least on her, like, response to it. I don't think she should be demanding an apology, but again, by not, by basically demanding that apology, she gave a lot of ammo to the right wing. And so the right wing takes it. They use it. Of course, they want to ignore important issues. Okay, we know that, right? And they also ignore their own hypocrisy in COVID-19, right? Because, again, for the longest time, they've downplayed the virus. They brought on people who are anti-maskers. And so I get that, right? And so I can't believe I'm saying this, but there's actually a point to be made on both sides. It's weird. It's weird. Okay? And look, Friend brings up something that's really important there. The fact that nobody had anything to say about the RNC bringing in, again, those 1,500 people who didn't wear masks. That's one of those things. And now they're making hay about Nancy Pelosi not making a mask. It's ridiculous. Or not wearing one. And so most of these people understand that are making the biggest noise about Pelosi. They're not doing it because they're concerned about the health of the people around her. They want to score cheap political points. And maybe that dresser owner, whatever, hair salon owner, maybe also fits into that camp. Maybe she's mad about the coronavirus lockdown, which, look, a lot of us are. A lot of us absolutely are. And so I understand. But also understand that anger is getting turned into political points and feeds into the idea that the COVID-19 is a hoax. And it's just not. It's not a hoax. It is a problem, right? And I do think that everybody needs to do their part. And again, Yas Queen should have known that this was something like this could happen. And I guess maybe that's really unfair of me to say, because I guess you don't know if somebody's going to release tapes, but you're the Speaker of the House, so maybe you should be a little bit more paranoid. At least this, if anybody could get one lesson from this, it's that you should be paranoid as hell if you're an elected official, because you don't know like what they're going to try to use against you. And so that said, this is a total mess, and pretty ridiculous, right? And somebody like Pelosi, I think that she is disconnected from the public. I don't think that she's an effective speaker. I don't think that she's a good representative for Democrats. And I think she should be replaced by someone progressive. And that's just my personal thoughts about her. But at the same time, Fox News spending so much time talking about this hair thing, kind of ridiculous. Okay. Wow. It's already almost been an hour. Apparently I spent too much time talking about Nancy Pelosi's hair too, which is kind of ridiculous. So, all right. You know what? We should do one more story because it's going to be a long weekend, and we're going to be back on Tuesday. So why not just do this here? One more story. Dango Bango says her hair's on fire, right? Well, I mean, it is now. It is now. All right. The Trump campaign, like many others before, is asking one question for the election. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Well, we may have an answer to that. So now, this is an analysis of economic data. It was done by journalist David K. Johnston. And what he did is he broke down how the economic policies of the Trump administration have benefited all Americans across this socioeconomic spectrum. And so I'm just going to kind of put it out there in answer to the question, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? It really depends on what part of the socioeconomic spectrum that you belong in. If you were already wealthy coming into 2016, well, then you're probably doing pretty good. If you were not wealthy coming into 2016, well, then you're doing worse. And again, this is all according to data. So now the analysis points out that more than half of all Americans actually had to make ends meet in 2018 on less money than 2016. And understand this is actually of data before the coronavirus pandemic. So this is when we were not having a massive economic downturn as well as virus. So now the nearly 87 million taxpayers making less than $50,000 a year actually had to get by in 2018 on $307 less per household than in 2016, the year before Trump took office. So look, $307. That's that's part of your rent, right? Or that's food. If you have, small family, right? Odds are larger families of four, are spending a lot more on food, or it's part of an insurance payment. It's car insurance, things like that, right? That's a significant amount of money. And yet, even though we have inflation, people are doing, are still expected to do the same with less money. And this is, again, after the massive Trump tax cuts have gone into effect. And so that's not good. In reality, 57% of American households were better off under the Democrats, under Barack Obama. And you guys remember, I have made videos talking about how people were not doing great under Obama either. And they're worse under Trump. So not really the best economy ever for working and middle-class people. But as you're going to see, it's been awesome for the rich. Awesome. All right. So the number of households enjoying incomes of $200,000 or more actually soared by more than 20%. The number of taxpayers making $10 million or more soared by 37% to a record 22,112 households. So you have a gigantic boom in billionaires, people making over $10 million a year. While the middle class, by the way, shrinks. Now, the Trump Republican tax cuts were highly concentrated up the income ladder, with hardly any tax savings going to the working poor, and only actually a small amount going to the middle class. Those making $50,000 to $100,000 a year, for example, paid just 3/4 of 1 percentage point less of their incomes to federal government. People making $2 million or $2.5 million saw their effective tax rate fall by about 3 times that much. So now that said, a lot of people will still look at Republicans and Donald Trump and say, hey, man, look, Republicans are just better on economics. I mean, the economy's better under Republicans. You know, taxes are better under Republicans. Republicans are just better stewards of the economy. Well, if that's the case, how come every time a Republican has taken office, at least in the last 2 decades, we've ended up with a recession? I mean, look, George W. Bush had the 2008 financial crisis, right? 2007, 2008. Obama inherited that and turned it around. And now, and I can't fault Donald Trump for coronavirus. I can fault him for his response, but for the appearance of coronavirus and for how bad it's gotten, yes, I can definitely blame Donald Trump, as well as the economic downturn as a result of Donald Trump, or I'm sorry, of the coronavirus under Trump. And so, again, here we have another Republican administration where we end up with a massive economic crisis. Great. Fantastic. And so now, here's the other thing, right? People have a bit of a weird idea. And this correlates to what I was saying, right? People have a weird idea of what the middle class actually is. Because if you're a middle class person and you're saying, oh no, Trump's made my life better. Well, like, are you actually middle class? What does that even mean? So now, if you ask Americans, 6 in 10 Americans say, yeah, I'm a member of the middle class. Or I'm even part of the upper middle class. I'm doing really good. Now, 87% of Americans who make at least $90,000 a year, interestingly enough, say that they are part of the middle class and are not wealthy. Now, look, if you're in the big cities, $90,000 to $100,000, that won't stretch too far, right? And I can totally understand that. But for the rest of the country, well, that's different. So now here's some more numbers that kind of show that nobody really understands what middle class means, right? Now, 46.5% of Americans make less than $30,000 a year. Now, yet, at the same time, most people will agree that you're no longer considered poor if you make at least $30,000 a year. So understand what $30,000 a year is. It's the equivalent of $15 an hour. $15 an hour is a living wage, right? It is the minimum that you need to survive without government assistance. That is not middle class. I mean, at the very least, it's maybe lower middle class. I would consider that working class, to be honest with you, because you are working and you're finally just barely out of poverty. But you're still in a lot of danger of falling back into it. And so $15 an hour, not very much. That's what the minimum wage should be, at least. And you could definitely make the argument that no, actually, our minimum wage should be somewhere around $22 to $23 an hour. And yes, as some of you do point out, that it does matter a lot where you live. Again, in the big cities, $100,000 is not going to get you very far. But where I live, for example, $100,000, you do pretty damn good, right? And so, again, it's pretty reasonable, or I should say it's pretty regional, right? So now, again, though, I think with a lot of the country, you have, that $15 an hour not getting you very far. I mean, you've got health insurance, the prices for that rising. You have the prices for college that have gone up over, 1,300% since the 1960s. You have the rise of prices for consumer goods. So when it comes down to it, $15 an hour in a lot of places is not enough. And as of September 2018, by the way, Pew reported that 52% of American adults were actually in the middle class, according to 2016 income figures. Now, again, Pew has a specific example of what they consider to be middle class. They define it as those earning between 2/3 and double the median household income. This Pew classification means that the category of middle class is made up of people making somewhere between $40,500 and $122,000 every year. So that's annually. So if we're using that classification, and again, there's many others, right? What most people see as you getting into the middle class, making at least $30,000 a year, is actually not part of the middle class, that you're actually part of the working poor. And so the problem is, I think, when it comes to making these declarative statements about, I'm going to help the middle class, what do you define as the middle class? I have seen politicians on the Republican side consider $100,000 to $200,000 a year middle class. And I guess if that, maybe applies in New York or California, might not apply anywhere else. And so it really does not have a definitive answer to what is middle class. Nobody really seems to know. So then understand that if you think about it in those terms, like, what do you define as middle class? When you hear a politician talking about middle class tax cuts and how they're going to be so great for you, how you're going to save so much money, if you're one of the people making $30,000 a year, you're not part of that middle class, even though technically you might be, according to someone's definition. You're really not going to benefit from those tax cuts, at least not as much as somebody making $100,000 a year or more. So understand, it's kind of complicated, but understand too that this might explain Trump's popularity with those who think that the Republican tax cuts were meant for them, or when really they were meant mostly for high earners. And so as a result, by the way, of those tax cuts, less people paying taxes in the system, you're going to have a cut in services, which are going to hurt the people making $30,000 or $35,000 a year. And so that's what the numbers illustrate, is that people who are not making that much are not benefiting from the Trump economy, while rich people, while wealthier people, especially in the cities, weirdly enough, places like New York and LA, rich people are doing fantastic in those areas, those generally more liberal areas. And yet, and I can't really call Silicon Valley liberal, to be fair, but people in rural areas are not seeing any benefit from Donald Trump and the Republicans' economic policies. And so that's interesting, right? So now there's another piece of this, right, which really kind of translates into how well wealthy people are doing compared to everyone else. Wealthier people are getting away with paying no taxes. In fact, Congress has cut, along with, of course, the White House, IRS staffing so deeply that it cannot pursue high earners that have just decided to stop filing taxes. In fact, in the 3 years ending in 2016, according to the report, the IRS identified 879,415 high-income Americans who did not bother to file a tax return. These people who did not pay taxes, which would be, of course, cheating on your taxes, owed an estimated $45.7 billion in taxes, according to the Treasury Inspector General for the Tax Administration. So this was back in a May 29th report from the Treasury Inspector. So they have cost the government nearly $46 billion just because, I don't feel like paying my taxes. Now, one of the people, by the way, who was criminal investigation by the IRS, was one of the Koch brothers. This was William Ingram Koch, right, who lived one door away from Mar-a-Lago. He got more than $1 million a year tax-free. So that's what he was earning. He didn't pay a damn thing in taxes when it came to that. That's amazing. And by the way, as soon as Trump assumed office, the IRS dropped the case immediately. I don't know if that's, a direct result of Donald Trump, but it could be a direct result of his actions in making sure to cut funding so that these, agencies are no longer able to function. Billions of dollars. And interestingly enough, Republicans want to blame the deficit on social programs for the poor. And most recently, by the way, on COVID-19 relief, which unsurprisingly, when it came to COVID-19 relief, where did most of that money go? Oh, went to the wealthiest Americans and corporations, of course. And then, well, I mean, Republicans, as I said before, gave a lot of money to the rich. What did they do for regular people? One $1,200 check. The elimination of interest on student loans, which, by the way, that actually is pretty good, so that you don't have to pay any interest in student loans. So you could theoretically make some significant dents in your student loan bills if you had money to put towards them. Problem is, a lot of people don't. Millions of people have filed for unemployment. They're no longer getting the $600 benefit, which means that there is about 8.3 million people who are jobless, who can't afford their bills, and you have a massive spike in evictions and homelessness. And so that's a bit of a disaster, right? And so understand that Republicans are blaming the deficit, the increase of the deficit, on mostly trying to help poor people, when in reality, a very, very small amount of money went towards helping people be able to survive during this crisis. And so that said, I would also caution people to watch out for Trump's deferment of payroll taxes. So that's one thing the administration decided to do, right? That was one of Trump's executive actions. He says, well, you know what? I'm going to defer your payroll taxes. That means you're going to save money, right? In reality, you're actually not going to save a whole lot of money. You're not going to actually save any money, because those payroll taxes, they're just deferred, which means you have to pay more in payroll taxes next year when you file. So you're actually going to owe more in those payroll taxes, while again, you have people that are just deciding not to file taxes at all on the upper income spectrum. And the administration is not going to go after them. They're going to let tax cheats get away with it, while you end up having to pay more in payroll taxes. And so not only that, but it's going to be really tough to repay that, because your wages have not kept up. According to the analysis, the share of American income from wages and salaries fell significantly from almost 71% in 2016 to less than 68% in 2018. And again, that's not accounting for 2019 or what's happening today. And the number of households, by the way, as that is happening, making over $1 million and more and paying no income, went up by 41% thanks to the Trump tax law. That's 556 additional households now making an average of $3.5 million while not contributing at all to the federal government. And again, with coronavirus, things have actually gotten much worse. I mean, we have food banks that are maxed out. They have lines going around the block because people can't feed themselves. And so if you're one of the millions of people that are now living in this reality, I think it's fairly obvious now that you can see how much you're being screwed by this administration. The question is that once you realize that, what are you going to do about it? And that's a question that you all have to grapple with on your own. Okay. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation. Thank you, Sven R. I appreciate that. Says if you can't read me the news, I won't get any. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Manuel Fernandez, greetings from Europe. Good job. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad that you stopped by and are supporting the show. I do appreciate the super chat. And you know what? I appreciate viewers from overseas checking in on the dumpster fire that is America. I'm glad you think that I'm doing a good job. And again, I do appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. Long weekend ahead of us. Labor Day. Please stay safe. Enjoy yourselves. Wear your masks. All that stuff. And we'll see you on Tuesday for an exciting next week. Again, that interview with Cenk Uygur that's going to happen on Wednesday. That's going to be fantastic. So we'll see you all then. Thank you. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.
Tighten up my meat.
Mike Pounds.
Please clap.
Wait. You're getting nervous, man.
Tolerate. Wet ass P word. There's some whores in this house.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.